Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So today I'm doing the Shakespeare Book Tag. I was very kindly tagged by Books with Brandywine, who I'll link down below. This is a really interesting tag because I haven't really seen many people do this, and I really like the questions that it covers, so I'm just gonna get straight into it. It's all themed around Shakespeare plays, and each prompt is kind of based off a different play. The first prompt is Much Ado About Nothing. Who is your favourite bickering couple that you know really cares about each other? This is a tough one because I don't really like the whole dynamic of couples who fight and then they're really deeply in love. I think verbal sparring can be entertaining sometimes, but it's not the kind of romantic relationship I particularly like. So the only one I could come up with was Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, because it's such a cliche, but I really do love their relationship. I like that all of their problems are kind of caused by lack of communication. It's like the quintessential rom-com scenario, except it's classy because it's a classic. And as soon as they start communicating with each other and getting over themselves, they realise that they're in love with each other. Yeah, and they don't really bicker so much as kind of, I mean they do bicker, but it's not a kind of punch punch kiss kiss kind of dynamic, which is the kind that I don't like. But yeah, and plus the Pride and Prejudice film with Keira Knightley is one of my favourite things to watch. It's just so well done, and I melt every time at the end. I'm not a romantic, but some things get me, and that's one of the things that gets me. So the next question is, measure for measure, pick a book where the plot is hard to explain. And for this I have gone with Will Haunt You by Brian Kirk. This is a horror book, and I picked this one because I can't really explain the plot beyond that. So it's a horror book, and it's kind of about this guy who was a famous rock star, and he's doing his last kind of concert, and then he gets in the car to go home, and he's read this book that his friend gave him, and then this weird voice comes on over the radio, and then it's just surreal madness after that. It doesn't really make any sense. I quite like this book. I did give it 3 out of 5 stars, despite its very, very weird, disjointed plot, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but it was an interesting read for me. The next prompt is A Midsummer Night's Dream. Pick a book with fairies or elves. I discussed this when I did my Creatures of the Night book tag. I haven't really read anything about fairies. For that I talked about Lost Boy by Christina Henry, and I didn't want to talk about it again, so I've picked Little Darlings by Melanie Golding. This isn't really the only other book I've read about fairies currently. I've got quite a lot on my TBR, but I haven't actually read any of them. And this is a thriller, and it's about a woman who has just given birth to twins, and she starts to believe that they have been swapped with changeling children. So I'm not going to say whether or not there are actually fairies in this, or whether it's part of her postnatal depression, because that's a huge part of the plot. But it has certain themes of fairies in it, and you should read it yourself to find out whether they're in it or not. The next prompt is Hamlet, and it's to pick an underutilized female character. I could have had so many options for this if it wasn't about books, but because it is specifically about books, I really struggled to think of one, and I went with Leigh from Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Yan. So Leigh's the main character, and the reason I think she's underutilized is because you can't really have a main character that's underutilized, but I don't think that she's done as well as she could be, because from what I've heard, most people who enjoy the book dislike her as a character, and those who dislike the book seem to dislike it because of her. So I just think that she could have been used better if her personality hadn't been so abrasive, or if the author had handled the fact that she's meant to be flawed better. So she's my pick for Hamlet. The next prompt is Sonnets. Pick your favourite poem. I have one favourite poem. It has always been my favourite poem, and that is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I can't remember how old I was when I first read this poem, but I memorised it around the age of 10, and I still have most of it memorised off by heart. I just love it. I think it's got fantastic rhythm, it's got a really strong story, it's got the gothic aspect. Yeah, it's always going to be my favourite poem. I don't read anywhere near as much poetry as I probably should, because I do like poetry quite a lot. But I do also really enjoy Milk and Honey, because I am a basic bitch. The next prompt is Richard III. Which book has a protagonist who is willing to do whatever they have to get what they want? Again, I struggled with this one. I know I've definitely read books with ruthless protagonists, but I couldn't think of any that I've read recently. So I had to go with Citra from Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a series of books. The second one is my favourite, that's Thunderhead. The first book I thought was okay. I can't really say anything about Citra without giving it away, but essentially in Scythe she's taken on as a apprentice to these scythes along with another boy. And in this world, scythes are the only way that people die, so they're kind of professional assassins, but they kill because the population needs controlling and not for any personal reasons or anything like that. So she gets taken on as an apprentice as well as this boy, but only one of them is going to be allowed to become a full-time scythe. And that's kind of the basic plot of the first book. She's a really great character. I liked her a lot more in Thunderhead than I did in Scythe. And she's just definitely willing to do whatever it takes to get what she wants. She's a very strong character, she's very determined, and yeah, I like her a lot. The next Shakespeare play is Antony and Cleopatra. What is a trope slash book concept slash buzzword thing that you really like and you haven't found the perfect example of it yet? So for this I had to pick dragons because I love dragons. I know loads of people love dragons. I really love dragons. And my problem is I love dragons, but I'm not a massive fan of fantasy books. Not high fantasy anyway. So as much as I love dragons, I haven't really read about dragons a lot, and I do dream of that perfect dragon book which hits all the right notes for me. And someday I'll hopefully find it. So if you know any dragon books that aren't too, like, Lord of the Rings type fantasy, then do let me know. I have bought The Priory of the Orange Tree because it was on offer on Amazon Kindle in the UK. So I did buy that, and I will eventually read it. I'm a little scared of it, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, dragons are amazing, and I would love a good dragon book. The next prompt is Titus Andronicus. Pick a work by a popular author that is lesser known. So for this I have gone with Some Girls Are by Courtney Summers. I think I talked about this book fairly recently, so I'll keep it short. Courtney Summers absolutely blew up with Sadie. Everyone on BookTube is reading it. I still haven't read Sadie, I need to read it. But she's always been one of my favourite authors. She writes really gritty, gut-punching contemporaries that have really strong feminist themes and kind of perfectly encapsulate really difficult emotions that particularly teenage girls go through. Some Girls Are is my favourite one of hers. It's about a popular queen bee character who has something appalling happen to her, and then her entire world is basically shattered, everyone turns against her. It's got massive trigger warnings for bullying, particularly psychological bullying. Particularly, I went to like an all-girls school, and it just perfectly captures that kind of atmosphere of constantly being on edge and not knowing whether you can trust people, and how brutal teenage girls can just be to each other. It's a very hard-hitting book. There's obviously quite a lot of trigger warnings for it, but it's fantastic, and I think it definitely deserves more attention. The next prompt is King Lear. Talk about a book with a complex female villain or anti-hero. So I picked Sheafing from A Forest of a Thousand Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. Again, I've talked about this book a fair amount on my channel. It's a fantasy book. It's a Asian retelling of the Evil Queen story from Snow White. That's a very loose description of it. It's a lot more original than that concept implies. Sheafeng is the main character. She's the one who is the Evil Queen counterpart, and she's very complex. I really liked her. The main reason I haven't picked up the sequel yet is because the sequel is told from the point of view of the Snow White character, and I'm not as interested in that as I was in Sheafeng's story. But yeah, it's a really great fantasy. It's not too, shall we say, bogged down with world building details, but it's got enough of it that it's an interesting world that is built up. And yeah, I strongly recommend it. The final prompt is Taming of the Shrew. Pick 2 polarizing books, one you loved and one you hated. This is tricky for me because I'm not sure what order these are going to go up, but I've also recently filmed the unpopular opinions tag and the no disclaimers book tag, so I'm trying to talk about different things than I talk about in those tags. So the first one, I'm going to pick the polarizing book that I liked, and that is The Host by Stephanie Meyer. So obviously this is the author of Twilight, everyone knows, like, it's looped right back around, so it's no longer cool to hate on Twilight. Everyone hated on Twilight, now it's getting defended again. I just love how things cycle like that. Yeah, like the backlash to the backlash. But anyway, The Host I have not read for years, I will say, but when I read it I thought it was beautiful. It's a really long book. It's a science fiction book about these aliens who invade planets by taking over the bodies of the people who already live on those planets, and it's told from the point of view of one of those aliens who takes over the body of this teenage girl, but the teenage girl is like, the alien has never inhabited anyone as of an high consciousness as humans, and so she's not used to the interaction. So she talks to the teenage girl in her head and she gets influenced by her previous life. So she starts to develop relationships with the human host's brother, with her boyfriend, stuff like that. There's a whole lot of things going on. I thought this was a really beautiful book when I read it. It made me cry 3 times, and I basically never cry at any books. Like I said, I have not read it for a few years, but yeah, I still think of it very fondly. And the polarizing book that I've picked that I didn't like is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Definitely pronounced that wrong. So Lolita, you probably know what it's about, you've probably heard of it, it's a classic. It is about a grown man who falls in love with a very, very young girl, and this weird kind of paedophilic complex relationship. I actually haven't really read this book. I tried to read it and I could not get through it. I don't remember how far I got, maybe like 20 pages in, and I was just not interested. It's obviously polarising because of the subject matter, but it is a classic and it's considered a very good piece of literature generally. But yeah, it was not for me. It was not, the writing style didn't gel with me. The final thing to do is give me your hands if we can be friends, and that is to tag some people. I wasn't really sure who to tag for this, so I'm going to tag Nicole from Beautiful Chaos of Books because I don't think she's done it yet, and I'm also going to tag Simone from Me, Simone and I. I'll link both of their channels down below. They're fantastic, go check them out if you haven't watched them already. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, it helps me out massively. If you want to do this tag as well and I haven't tagged you, you're more than welcome to go ahead, do it. You can say I tagged you, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I hope to see you next time.